So if you think about it, for 104 minutes, millions of people sat in movie theaters in the late summer of 1999 and just willingly shared a mass hallucination.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild when you frame it like that.
Right. I mean, think about that for a second. Millions of us sat in the dark, watching a man interact with his wife, walk the rainy streets of Philadelphia, sit in a parlor across from a terrified kid, and we just believed every single second of it. We completely bought into his reality.
And, none of it was real, not one bit.
Exactly. Today, we're not just doing some basic retrospective on a famous plot twist. We are talking about how a director meticulously hijacked your nervous system, blinded your peripheral vision, and made you completely complicit in a ghost's delusion.
It really is one of the most audacious psychological tricks ever pulled in modern cinema because, the brilliance isn't just that the audience was fooled, it's how we were fooled and what that deception reveals about the way our own minds construct reality.
Yeah, how we process trauma and desperately search for meaning. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are undertaking a massive mission. We're drawing from some incredibly rigorous academic analysis, specifically research originating out of the University of Haifa by Itay Maor, guided by Dr. Yitzhak Benyamini.
Yes, truly fascinating work.
And we are using it to completely decode M. Night Shyamalan's thriller, The Sixth Sense.
Yep.
And I want to be super clear right off the bat. If you are just here to, reminisce about the he was dead the whole time spoiler, you are going to miss the actual genius of what is happening on screen.
Oh, for sure. The twist is just the surface level.
Right. We are looking at this film as a profound psychological and sociological text. We're going to get into the notoriously complex psychoanalytic theories of Jacques Lacan, the sweeping historical sociology of Max Weber, and the gritty mechanics of cinematic manipulation.
And the reason we are doing this isn't just to sound smart at dinner parties. What makes this particular deep dive so special is that it will permanently alter the way you watch movies.
I really believe that.
You are going to stop being a passive spectator who just lets a film wash over you. You're going to become an active partner in deconstructing reality and illusion, first on the screen, and then, inevitably, in your own life.
Exactly. Whether you're a film student looking to understand the absolute fundamentals of visual storytelling, or you're just someone who loves a truly great thriller and wants to understand the deep structural psychology of fear and human connection, this is custom tailored for you.
It really is a perfect text for film students because it operates on so many academic levels simultaneously.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with the director's toolkit. How does Shyamalan actually build this trap? Because he doesn't just lie to us. He uses the camera to make us lie to ourselves.
To understand the mechanics of the trap, you really have to look at Shyamalan's cinematic lineage. He is heavily, almost reverently, influenced by classical filmmakers, with Alfred Hitchcock being the most prominent.
Right, and when people say Hitchcockian, they usually just mean, suspenseful.
Yeah, but Hitchcockian suspense is a very specific mechanical science. It is the slow, agonizing cultivation of anxiety through visual misdirection and subjective perspective. Hitchcock famously explains suspense by talking about a bomb under a table.
Oh, the classic bomb analogy. Break that down for us.
So if two characters are playing cards and a bomb goes off, that's just a surprise. You get 10 seconds of shock. But if you show the audience the bomb ticking under the table and then show the characters playing cards, you get 15 minutes of agonizing suspense.
Right, because the audience knows something the characters don't. But Shyamalan inverts that, doesn't he?
He completely inverts it. Shyamalan puts the bomb under the table, but he makes the viewer just as oblivious as the characters. Yet, brilliantly, he still manages to make us feel the ticking clock in our nervous system.
It's like a subconscious anxiety.
Exactly. He does this by anchoring us entirely in a flawed perspective. And this connects to a fascinating artistic concept from the 1920s known as Russian formalism.
Okay, hold on. You're going to have to walk me through how 1920 Soviet film theory connects to a 90s Bruce Willis blockbuster. Because on the surface, those feel like they belong on completely different planets.
I know, it sounds like a massive stretch until you look at the core philosophy of the formalists. Theorists like Victor Shklovsky argued that as we go through life, our perception becomes automatic.
Like driving a route to work and not remembering the drive.
Precisely. We stop actually seeing things, we just recognize them. The purpose of art, Shklovsky said, is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived, not as they are conceptually known. He called this technique astranony, or defamiliarization, making things strange.
So how does it translate to the screen?
In cinema, this means a director doesn't just show you an object or a room clearly and objectively. They use the camera, the lighting, the pacing to show you how that room is felt psychologically by the character.
So it's not about capturing objective reality, it's about capturing a psychological state.
Exactly. Shyamalan is a master of this formalist approach. He manipulates the cinematic syntax so that the reality we see on screen is shaped entirely by subjective perception. We are seeing Malcolm's psychological state.
Which brings us to the core structural trick of the film. Our notes for this deep dive focus heavily on the idea that the movie actually features two parallel fabulas.
Yes, the dual narrative structure.
For anyone who hasn't taken a film theory class, a fabula is essentially the raw chronological narrative, the actual events of the story. But Shyamalan is running two of them simultaneously, right?
He is. The first fabula is the visible narrative, the one we are completely sold on for the first hour and 40 minutes. It's a straightforward psychological drama.
A dedicated, albeit traumatized, child psychologist named Dr. Malcolm Crowe is trying to redeem himself by helping a terrified young boy named Cole Sear.
Right. It has a clear arc, clear stakes. The second fabula is the hidden narrative, the quiet, unseen truth. And that truth is that the psychologist is dead. He was murdered in the opening scene.
He is moving through the world as a ghost, unable to interact with the physical environment, and utterly oblivious to his own death. I was trying to think of a good analogy for how this actually works on the brain.
It's a tricky concept to visualize.
Because it's not just two stories happening side by side. It's more like an optical illusion. You know that famous Rubin vase illustration? The one where if you look at it one way, it's a white vase. But if your brain flips the perspective, it's suddenly two black faces looking at each other in silhouettes.
Oh, that is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Yes, absolutely.
For the entire movie, Shyamalan forces your brain to only see the two faces. He hides the vase in plain sight. He uses the cinematic syntax to blind your peripheral vision. We are placed squarely inside Malcolm's hallucination.
Think about when Malcolm sits opposite his wife in a restaurant.
Oh, that scene is so incredibly manipulative when you rewatch it.
Right. The camera frames it intimately. It looks like a marital dispute. She's silent, she's cold, she avoids eye contact. As viewers, we bring our own understanding of human relationships to the scene and we fill in the blanks.
We say, they are estranged because of his work. We don't realize until the end that he isn't even registering on her physical plane. She's just a grieving widow eating dinner alone.
And that is why the viewer becomes an active participant in deconstructing the reality of the film, because cinema inherently asks us to trust the lens.
We are conditioned from a century of movie watching to assume the camera is, generally speaking, an objective narrator, unless we are explicitly told otherwise with, like, a dream sequence or a blurry lens.
Shyamalan weaponizes that trust.
Yeah.
We're completely complicit in Malcolm's hallucination, and it's only at the very end, when the illusion violently shatters, that we're forced to do the active work.
Right. We have to rewind the entire movie in our heads and reinterpret every single interaction. Every door we thought he opened, every conversation we thought he had. We realize he was just projecting his own voice into a void.
It's staggering when you realize you were just a passenger in a ghost's delusion.
It really is. And I think that's the perfect bridge into the psychological heavy hitter of this discussion. If we want to understand why Malcolm is hallucinating and why Cole is so terrified, we have to talk about Jacques Lacan.
We do, and we should probably warn everyone, Jacques Lacan is notoriously one of the most complex, dense, and challenging thinkers in the history of psychoanalysis.
That is an understatement.
He was a French psychiatrist who famously called for a return to Freud, but he brought a highly philosophical, linguistic, and structuralist approach to Freud's original clinical ideas. Reading Lacan can feel like trying to decipher a riddle.
Which is exactly why we are going to translate his intensely academic concepts into plain English today. Because I remember trying to read Lacan in college, and it literally felt like reading stereo instructions written in ancient Greek. It was impenetrable.
It's very common to feel that way.
But once you strip away the dense jargon, the core of what he's saying is actually incredibly relatable to how every single one of us experiences being human. So let's break down Lacan's three orders that construct human consciousness: the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic.
Let's start with the foundation, the order that is perhaps the most difficult to grasp because its name is deceptive. the real.
Because it doesn't mean reality in the way we usually use the word.
Exactly. In everyday language, when we say the real world, we mean the physical stuff around us, taxes, traffic, the chair you're sitting on. But for Lacan, that everyday organized world is not the real.
So what is it?
The real, in Lacanian terms, is the impossible, the chaotic, the fundamentally traumatic. It is the raw, unmitigated existence that absolutely cannot be put into words. It lacks structure, it lacks language, and it actively resists all symbolization.
It's like the abyss.
Yes. It is the overwhelming flood of sensation and terror that disrupts our organized lives. It is the trauma that leaves you speechless.
Okay, hold on to that concept of speechlessness, because it leads right into the next order, the imaginary. This is tied to what Lacan famously called the mirror stage, which happens early in human development, right?
Correct. Imagine a human infant. In their actual internal experience, a baby feels like a fragmented, chaotic jumble of limbs, hunger, and uncoordinated needs. They don't have a cohesive sense of self.
They don't know where they end and the crib begins.
Exactly. But then, at some point, typically between 6 and 18 months, the baby looks into a mirror and sees a reflection. They see a whole, complete, bounded image. And they internalize that image. They say, internally, that complete thing is me.
But it's a trap, isn't it?
It is a total trap. It creates a sense of identity and ego, but it's fundamentally an illusion. The reflection is a lie because it appears perfect, coordinated, and autonomous, while the baby's actual internal physical experience is still messy, dependent, and helpless.
So the ego is built on a misunderstanding.
So from the very beginning of our identity, there is an inherent alienation. There is a permanent, unbridgeable gap between the messy reality of who we feel we are and the idealized, complete image we project and strive to be. That space of illusion and ego is the imaginary.
And finally, we get to the life raft, the symbolic. This is the order of language, culture, laws, and what Lacan calls the big other.
Yes, the symbolic is the system that gives meaning to our existence. It is the vast network of social rules, grammar, relationships, and taboos that we are born into. Long before you were born, the symbolic order existed.
And we have to submit to it to survive.
When we enter it, we submit to the rules of language. We learn to speak. Learning to speak is what allows us to communicate, to build societies, to function, but it comes at a cost.
What's the cost?
The moment you put a feeling into a word, you distance yourself from the raw, primal reality of that feeling. You sacrifice the pure experience of the real to gain the safety of the symbolic. The symbolic order organizes the terrifying chaos of the real into something manageable.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to try an analogy to ground this for everyone listening, because keeping these three distinct is crucial for the rest of the film.
Go for it.
Imagine you are a toddler and you touch a red-hot, burning stove. The searing, unspeakable, overwhelming, world-shattering pain of that burn. The pure, physical trauma before your brain can even process what happened. That is the real. There are no words for it. It is just chaos and pain.
A perfect example of the unsymbolized trauma.
Then, a moment later, you look in a mirror and you see yourself crying. You recognize, that is me who was hurt. You create a narrative of yourself as a wounded victim. You look at the burn on your hand and identify with it. That is the imaginary.
Right, you are forming an identity around the image.
Finally, your parent runs into the kitchen, grabs your hand, and emphatically teaches you the word hot. Now you have a tool. The next time you see the stove, you don't have to touch it to know the pain. You can just say hot.
You've codified the trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can warn your little sister by saying hot. You have taken the unspeakable trauma and translated it into language. That is the symbolic. Language saves you from the chaos. It literally puts a fence around the fire.
I love that analogy. It perfectly encapsulates the function of language as a defense mechanism against trauma. And if we take that framework and apply it to the macro structure of the sixth sense, the entire film reveals itself as a massive psychoanalytic journey.
It's a cinematic roadmap.
It is. It's the roadmap of a traumatized subject. The boy, Cole, trying to escape the burning stove. He is trying to move out of the terrifying, unspeakable real and find his way into the safety and structure of the symbolic through the healing power of language.
So let's look at Cole Sear, played in a frankly staggering performance by Haley Joel Osment. If we track his psychological development chronologically through the film, we meet a 10-year-old boy who is absolutely drowning.
And even his name is symbolically loaded.
Right. Cole sounds phonetically like call, as in someone receiving a message, a frequency. And his last name's Sear, Sounds like seer, as in a prophet or an oracle who is cursed to see the future and see the dead.
From a strictly Lacanian perspective, when we are introduced to Cole, his psychological state is catastrophic. He is living almost entirely within the order of the real.
Because he's constantly touching the stove.
His daily existence is defined by the terrifying, unspeakable experience of literally seeing dead people. And he doesn't just see pale, translucent spirits. He sees the gruesome, bloody, violent realities of their deaths.
Like the teenager with a gunshot wound to the back of the head.
Exactly. These ghosts invade his private space, his bedroom, his school, his church, without any rules, without boundaries, and crucially, without language. They just appear and project their trauma onto him.
And because he has no words to explain this to anyone, and because even if he did, no rational adult would believe him, he is completely, utterly isolated. He is full of raw fear. He is suffering from an intense, crushing loneliness.
He is trapped in a chaotic reality that he cannot symbolize.
He's touching that burning stove every single day, and no one is giving him the word hot. Which brings us to a really fascinating part of the research regarding the female characters in the film, specifically the mothers.
Yes, their relationship to the symbolic order is vital here.
Let's talk about Cole's mother, Lynn, played by Toni Collette. She is arguably one of the most heartbreaking characters in the movie. She loves him fiercely. She works multiple jobs. She is trying so hard, but she cannot reach him.
She can't reach him because there is a fundamental breakdown in communication, which means a breakdown in the symbolic order. Lynn is carrying her own profound, unresolved trauma.
Specifically regarding her relationship with her own deceased mother, right?
Yes. If you watch their interactions closely, the scenes in the kitchen, the moments before school, there is a palpable lack of connection. They talk past each other, they clearly love each other, but they cannot connect on the level of truth.
Wait, let me push back on this a little bit, because it feels almost a little too easy, historically speaking, for psychoanalysis to just point a finger at the mother and say, maternal failure.
It's a common critique of the field.
Isn't it a bit unfair to blame Lynn here? She's a single mother dealing with a child who is exhibiting symptoms of severe psychosis. How is she supposed to provide a symbolic structure for literal ghosts?
That's a very valid challenge, and it's important to clarify that Lacanian analysis isn't about assigning moral blame to the mother. It's about analyzing the function of the roles within the family structure.
Okay, so it's structural, not personal.
In traditional psychoanalytic theory, the mother-child dyad is the initial all-encompassing world for the infant. But eventually, a third term, traditionally the function of the father or the law, must intervene to separate the child from the mother and introduce them to the broader rules of society and language.
And Lynn is just overwhelmed.
Because of Lynn's own limitations, her own grief, and the sheer, impossible, supernatural reality of Cole's situation, she simply cannot provide that third term. She cannot be the anchor that pulls him out of the real.
She actually almost makes it worse by trying to be rational, doesn't she?
In her desperate attempts to understand him through conventional rational means, asking him what's wrong, taking him to doctors, she inadvertently reinforces his isolation because he knows she won't believe the truth. She, too, is somewhat trapped in the real alongside him, drowning in a domestic situation she cannot name or control.
And we see a bizarrely similar parallel with Malcolm's wife, Anna. She is completely alienated from Malcolm. Her silence, her absolute refusal to speak to him or even acknowledge his presence in the room represents the physical void of Malcolm's death.
She is entirely cut off from his symbolic world and he from hers.
So, to synthesize this, because the maternal figures are struggling with their own profound communication breakdowns, the symbolic order, the network of language and rules that is supposed to keep us safe and connected, has fractured.
The structure has failed him.
Cole has no anchor. He's floating in a nightmare. And this fracture in the symbolic is massively exacerbated by the total glaring absence of Cole's biological father, who we learn has abandoned the family.
Yes, the visual cues for this in the film are brilliant. We see Cole constantly wearing the physical remnants of his absent father.
He wears his father's broken watch. He wears his father's glasses that don't even have lenses in them. It's such a pathetic, heartbreaking image when you realize what he's doing.
He is trying to physically, literally build a structure out of props to protect himself because the psychological structure of a father figure is gone.
It's a perfect visual representation of his yearning. He is wearing the empty symbols of a father, a watch that tells no time, glasses that provide no vision. It highlights his desperate need for order, for the law, in a world of terrifying chaos.
Okay, so that's Cole, trapped in the real. But now let's shift our perspective to Dr. Malcolm Crowe. Because Malcolm isn't dealing with the real. Malcolm is trapped in a completely different psychological order.
Right. Malcolm's identity, his motivations, and his entire perception of reality in the film can be elegantly explained through Lacan's mirror stage and the imaginary order.
Malcolm is living an absolute airtight illusion. He believes he is alive. He believes he is walking the streets of Philadelphia, functioning as a respected doctor, and fixing his past failure with a former patient, Vincent Gray, by successfully treating this new boy, Cole.
He is clinging to an idealized image of himself. If we go back to the mirror stage, Malcolm's reflection in the mirror is the award-winning, capable, savior-child psychologist. That's his imaginary ego, and he refuses to let it go, even in death.
The ego is protecting him from the real of his own death.
But why? Why does his mind construct this specific, elaborate hallucination instead of just, moving on to the afterlife? To explain the engine driving this illusion, the research introduces another major thinker, completely outside of psychoanalysis.
Yes, Max Weber, the German sociologist. This is where the analysis gets truly interdisciplinary.
Max Weber is one of the foundational architects of modern sociology. And arguably his most famous, influential concept is the Protestant ethic.
In his work, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Weber analyzed how the theology of Protestantism, specifically the harsh doctrines of Calvinism, inadvertently created the psychological conditions for modern capitalism.
Wait. I really need to challenge this connection. We just spent 20 minutes talking about French psychoanalysis, and now we are bringing 19th century sociological theories about Calvinist capitalism into a Bruce Willis ghost story.
I know, it's a leap.
I struggle to buy that. Isn't Malcolm just experiencing basic human guilt over getting his patient killed? Why do we need Max Weber to explain this?
It's a great question, but the connection is actually profound when you look at the cultural water we swim in. You see, basic human guilt doesn't compel a dead man to construct an entire false reality where he is still clocked in at work.
Well, do your point.
To understand Malcolm's specific pathology, you have to understand the Protestant ethic. Historically, Calvinism taught predestination, the idea that God had already decided who was saved and who was damned, and there was nothing you could do to change it.
Which sounds terrifying.
It was. This created immense, crushing psychological anxiety among believers. Am I saved? How do I know? The pastoral solution that evolved was, look at your life. If you are working tirelessly in your earthly vocation, living a rational, disciplined lifestyle, and achieving success, that is a sign that you are among the elect.
So success equals salvation.
Over centuries, the religious component faded away, but the psychological machinery remained. Relentless work, professional success, and taking extreme personal responsibility for your vocation became deeply, inextricably tied to a person's moral worth.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see it now. So how does this apply to Malcolm in 1999 Philadelphia?
Malcolm is the ultimate product of modern Western society. He is deeply steeped in this secularized Protestant work ethic. His entire identity, his fundamental sense of self-worth, is entirely defined by his profession.
Think about the opening scene of the movie.
Exactly. He is sitting with his wife, drinking wine, celebrating an award from the city honoring his work. He is at the absolute pinnacle of his imaginary ego.
But then Vincent Gray, a former patient he failed to help, breaks into his house, accuses Malcolm of failing him, and shoots him.
For Malcolm, this isn't just a physical death. It is a profound, world-shattering moral and professional failure. It was a failure of his calling.
Therefore, according to the deeply internalized logic of the Protestant ethic, he is damned.
His ledger is unbalanced. He cannot rest. He is trapped in the world of the living as a ghost because his internalized work ethic demands that he fix this failure. He must successfully treat a new patient, Cole, who shares Vincent's symptoms to balance the cosmic scales.
He cannot transition to the afterlife until his professional duty is fulfilled. So, to put it bluntly, Malcolm's ghost is essentially a workaholic who doesn't know he's dead because he's too obsessed with finishing his to-do list.
In a tragic psychological sense, yes. His entire reality, the hallucination he sustains, is a desperate construct designed to protect his fragile ego from the dual trauma of his own physical death and his professional inadequacy.
The imaginary order shields him from the horrifying real of his demise, and the Protestant ethic provides the ceaseless engine that keeps the illusion running.
He replaces the terrifying truth of death with the comforting bureaucratic structure of a patient case file. He hides in his work.
And this incredible collision of Cole's unspeakable trauma and Malcolm's desperate need to be a savior brings us to what is arguably the most important, masterfully crafted scene in the movie, the hospital scene.
Oh, the hospital scene is legendary.
If you remember the film, Cole has just been at a birthday party. Some older kids play a cruel prank and lock him in a dark, cramped attic closet. He gets attacked by something supernatural in there and ends up hospitalized. The deep dive zeroes in on the scene where Malcolm visits him in the hospital room.
This moment represents the absolute turning point in the therapist-patient relationship. It is a masterclass in visual storytelling. Shyamalan designs every frame of this scene meticulously to express the psychological weight of what is about to happen.
First, look at the lighting. The hospital room is not bright and sterile. It has very low lighting, lots of shadows, emphasizing the unknown, the fear, and the liminal space between life and death.
And the color red. We have to talk about the color red.
Yes. Before this scene, Cole is wearing a bright red sweater. At the hospital, the sweater is removed. Throughout the history of cinema, red has been used to signal danger, passion, or blood.
But Shyamalan uses red in The Sixth Sense very deliberately. Every time you see a red object, a doorknob, a balloon, a sweater, a woman's dress, it symbolizes a crossing over, a presence of the supernatural, or the intense emotional weight of the dead interacting with the living.
Exactly. And the removal of Cole's red sweater in the hospital signifies that his protective layer, his guard, has been stripped away. He is left utterly vulnerable, exposed in his hospital gown.
Then we have the cinematic expression through camera angles. When the conversation begins, the camera looks down at Cole from a high angle.
This is a classic technique to make a subject look small, vulnerable, exhausted, and pinned down. In this case, literally pinned down by the white sheets of the hospital bed.
He is the traumatized subject in severe distress. Malcolm, on the other hand, is shot from a low angle. The camera looks up at him.
This makes Malcolm appear larger, authoritative, commanding the space.
Even though we later learn he is a ghost, in this moment, visually and psychologically, Malcolm is the representation of Lacan's big other. He is sitting there as the symbolic father, the figure of authority, knowledge, and language.
And then comes the confession. The moment the entire movie has been building towards. Cole pulls the blanket up over his face, hiding everything but his eyes. It's like he's bracing for an explosion.
He says to Malcolm, "I want to tell you my secret now."
He is finally, after years of silent torture, ready to use language to define his trauma. And he delivers arguably the most famous line in modern cinema history.
"I see dead people." The delivery of that line is critical to its psychological impact. He isn't screaming. He isn't hysterical. He is whispering a terrible, heavy truth.
He is finally taking the unspeakable, chaotic horror of the real and forcing it into the symbolic order by giving it words.
He is trusting Malcolm, sitting there as the big other, to receive this language and hold it.
If you watch that scene closely, the camera does something incredible as he speaks. As Cole delivers the confession, the camera executes a slow, deliberate dolly in.
Yes, the dolly in.
It slowly pushes in, zooming closer and closer to Cole's face, matched by a tightening frame on Malcolm's face as he listens.
That cinematic syntax is not just a cheap trick for dramatic effect. The dolly in mimics the psychological merging of the therapist and the patient. As the camera pushes in, it slowly eliminates the background, blurring the edges of the hospital room, isolating them from the rest of the world.
The viewer's consciousness is literally fused with theirs.
We are locked into this intensely intimate exchange of trauma and language. The tight framing forces the audience to experience the claustrophobia and the anxiety of the revelation right alongside them.
It gives me chills just thinking about it, because when I look at that camera slowly pushing in, to me, it's the visual equivalent of a key finally, painfully turning in a rusty lock.
That's a great way to put it.
For his entire life, Cole has been screaming silently. The unspeakable horror of the real is finally being translated into the symbolic through spoken words. By saying the phrase, "I see dead people," he changes the nature of his reality.
It's no longer just a physical assault on his senses, it becomes a concept. He makes it something that can be analyzed, understood, and eventually managed.
That is exactly the Lacanian interpretation of therapeutic intervention. And it builds perfectly into the next crucial phase of our analysis, the role of the symbolic father and mental transformation.
Because once Cole gives his trauma language, Malcolm has to respond. We established earlier that Cole's biological father is gone. There's a massive void.
Malcolm steps directly into that void. But it's vital to understand that in psychoanalysis, the father isn't strictly a biological parent.
Right. It's not about DNA. It's a function.
Precisely. The father is a cultural, structural function. It is the rule maker, the boundary setter, the entity that introduces the law, language, and order to the child.
The symbolic father is what pulls the child out of the chaotic, unmediated fusion with the mother and forces them into the broader, structured social world. Since Cole lacks this structure, Malcolm becomes his symbolic father. He provides the scaffolding.
And what makes Malcolm effective here is that he doesn't just sit there passively taking notes and nodding. He actively changes the narrative for Cole. He gives him a concrete tool.
Later in the film, after doing some research, Malcolm tells Cole, maybe they don't want to hurt you. Maybe they just want help. Next time, ask them what they want.
That is the pivotal therapeutic breakthrough. Malcolm is teaching Cole to use communication, which is the ultimate tool of the symbolic order, to conquer his primal fear.
He tells Cole to stop running, to turn around, and to turn the terrifying, unspeakable monsters from the real into subjects that can be spoken to in the symbolic.
And we see Cole's mental shift almost immediately. He transforms right before our eyes. He goes from a terrified victim huddled in a makeshift blanket tent, completely trapped in the real, to an active, courageous participant in the symbolic.
We see this when he confronts the ghost of the little poisoned girl, Kyra Collins. He is terrified, but he speaks to her. He asks what she wants.
And he takes action. He takes her hidden box containing the videotape of her mother poisoning her and gives it to her living father. By doing this, Cole masters his trauma. He uses language and action to organize the chaos. He becomes the agent of his own life.
The ultimate proof of this profound mental shift happens near the end of the film. We see Cole confidently performing on stage in the school play.
He is playing the young King Arthur, and we watch him pull the sword from the stone.
Symbolically, pulling the sword from the stone represents achieving wholeness, claiming one's rightful place in the order of the world, and healing the sick wasteland. Cole has successfully healed his own psychological wasteland. He has integrated his trauma into a functioning, healthy identity.
And there is such a beautiful, almost tragic irony at the heart of this. Malcolm, who is physically absent, he's literally a ghost, a non-entity who casts no shadow and moves nowhere in the physical world, provides the ultimate solid psychological structure, language, and presence for Cole.
Meanwhile, Cole's mother, who is physically present, cooking his meals, hugging him, and weeping for him, could not provide that specific symbolic structure he desperately needed to survive.
It really makes you pause. For everyone listening right now, I want you to think about who or what serves as the symbolic father in your own life. When you are facing overwhelming anxiety, when you are touching the burning stove of your own deepest fears, what is the structure, the language, or the person that helps you put it into words so you can finally manage it?
It's a crucial question for our own psychological well-being. We all need a framework to translate our fears.
Now, if we want to elevate this and connect Cole's personal healing to the broader macroscopic philosophy of the film, we have to bring Max Weber back into the conversation.
Yes, because the film isn't just making a statement about psychology, it's making a statement about the modern world. The research focuses on another massive concept of Weber's, the disenchantment of the world, or in the original German, Entzauberung der Welt.
Disenchantment. That just sounds like a profoundly sad concept. It sounds like growing up and realizing magic isn't real.
On a societal level, that is exactly what it is. It is Weber's profound, somewhat melancholic diagnosis of modern history. Weber argued that as Western society modernized, the relentless rise of science, rationalism, and bureaucratic logic systematically stripped the world of its magic, its religious myths, its mysteries, and its spiritual explanations.
I want to paint a picture for you to make this visceral. Imagine a medieval peasant standing in a field as a massive, violent thunderstorm rolls in.
For that peasant, the world is deeply enchanted. The storm isn't just weather. It is the tangible anger of the gods, or the work of demons, or a divine warning. The world is alive with supernatural meaning.
Now compare that to a modern accountant standing in an office building watching the exact same storm. For the accountant, the storm is just a low-pressure system meeting a high-pressure system. It's atmospheric thermodynamics. The mystery is gone.
We replaced mysticism with calculation. We traded gods for barometric pressure.
We traded ghosts for spreadsheets.
Precisely. We live in a disenchanted world where everything can, theoretically, be explained by science and reason. But how does Shyamalan's approach to the supernatural compare to Weber's diagnosis?
Our research suggests that the sixth sense acts as a direct, powerful counterargument, a pushback against Weber's disenchantment.
How so? Just by setting a ghost story in modern-day Philadelphia.
Yes, but on a much deeper thematic level. Instead of portraying a cold, rational, disenchanted world where every psychological issue can be solved by a pill or a textbook, Shyamalan violently re-enchants the world. He brings back the supernatural, the presence of souls, and the absolute terrifying necessity of belief.
Think about Malcolm's journey. He approaches Cole initially as a pure scientist, a man of the disenchanted world. He is a medical professional relying on rational psychology, trying to diagnose Cole with a chemical imbalance, early onset schizophrenia, or a behavioral issue stemming from divorce.
But the film forcefully argues that science and psychology, Malcolm's rational tools, are simply inadequate to explain the universe or to heal Cole's deepest wounds.
Malcolm literally has to abandon his medical textbooks, accept that magic or ghosts are real, and start believing the impossible in order to actually help his patient.
Correct, and this crucial shift applies to the viewer's realization as well, because as viewers, we are modern people. We live in Weber's disenchanted society. We rely on rational cause and effect.
When we watch the movie, we assume there is a logical, real-world explanation for everything we are seeing. We assume Malcolm is just a doctor struggling with his marriage. But Shyamalan forces us, against our modern conditioning, to accept the supernatural truth.
The ending sequence is where this all collapses beautifully. When Malcolm finally realizes he is dead, that incredible breathtaking sequence where he sees his own breath fog the cold air, when he touches the wound on the back of his shirt and sees the blood, and when his wife's wedding ring drops from his open hand and clatters on the floor, he finally accepts the magic of the world.
He accepts that the impossible is real, and because we have been tied to his perspective for 2 hours, we, the audience, have to accept it too. We are forced to completely abandon our rational, disenchanted explanations.
It's as if Shyamalan is looking across the century at Max Weber and saying, "You thought science killed the ghosts. You thought the world was disenchanted and mapped out. Look closer. The ghosts are everywhere." The film forces us to trade our comfortable modern skepticism for ancient awe.
This raises an essential point about why the film resonates so deeply, why it became such a massive cultural phenomenon, and why we are still talking about it decades later. It feeds our modern secular hunger for meaning.
Even in a disenchanted world, governed by the Protestant work ethic, spreadsheets, and rational science, human beings still possess a deep psychological yearning for the spiritual.
We want to believe that death is not the absolute final end, and that our actions have cosmic rather than just economic significance. The Sixth Sense provides a cinematic space for that re-enchantment. It lets us believe again.
Wow. Okay, I want to try to recap this incredible journey we've just been on, because we covered an immense amount of ground. We started by looking at how a brilliant director uses Hitchcockian suspense and the defamiliarization of Russian formalism, not just for cheap jump scares, but to trap us completely inside the flawed, hallucinated fabula of a ghost. We were forced into an optical illusion of reality.
Then we took the incredibly dense, complex psychoanalysis of Jacques Lacan and used it to understand a deeply traumatized little boy. We saw how Cole moved from the unspeakable, chaotic, burning terror of the real and found his way into the healing power of symbolic language.
And he was guided there by a ghost who stepped in to act as his ultimate symbolic father.
And we layered all of that with the historical sociology of Max Weber, seeing Malcolm not just as a spook, but as the ultimate manifestation of the Protestant worker, a man driven by deep cultural anxiety to fix his past mistakes even after death.
Ultimately, we saw how Shyamalan pushed back against Weber's concept of disenchantment, bringing magic, mystery, and the vital necessity of belief back into a modern, rational world.
It makes you want to turn off this audio, go find the movie, and watch it again right now with a completely different lens. You will see every frame differently.
And it leaves me with one final lingering thought. Something to chew on long after we wrap up here. We've spent an hour talking about how the ghosts in the film are manifestations of unresolved trauma. They are stuck in the physical world, wandering around, angry and terrified, because they haven't been heard, because they haven't been given language.
But what about the silent ghosts walking around in our own lives?
Right. Maybe they aren't literal spirits in Victorian clothing with unfinished business. Perhaps our own modern anxieties, our deeply unprocessed traumas, the heavy things keeping us awake, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Maybe they are just our own ghosts.
And maybe they're just waiting for us to find the right words, waiting for us to be brave enough to bring them out of the terrifying, chaotic real and into the symbolic order.
So we can finally look directly at our own fears, give them a name, say to them, "I see you," and finally set them free. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We appreciate your curiosity, your time, and your willingness to look so much deeper beyond the surface. Until next time.